with Commissioner Hoekstra. He's Commissioner in charge of climate action, in the European Union. I had a chat with him, and we spoke about issues around climate change and what type of, support the European Union is giving to Zambia when it comes to fighting climate change. Here is a piece of an interview that I had with Commissioner Hoekstra. Commissioner Hoekstra, thank you so much for accepting to speak with us tonight. Welcome to Zambia. I would like to find out, first of all, your purpose to visit in Zambia and your meeting with the President of the Republic of Zambia. I know for a fact that you met him earlier on today, and obviously the impressions that you're going to take back to Brussels.
Well, first of all, I'm truly delighted to be here, and we had an excellent day with meeting the President and meeting your Environment Minister. And the reason I'm here is because there is a clear ambition, a clear desire in your beautiful country, here in the region and in Africa at large, to make sure we do our utmost to make COP28, the climate conference we will be organizing in a couple of weeks, into a success. And as the European Union, we seek to further enhance this bond, not only with Zambia, but with Africa at large, because we feel we are amongst the most ambitious at the global stage in working on adaptation and working on mitigation.
Commissioner, realistically speaking, there's a lot of skepticism about climate change. Could you tell us about the potential serious that climate change brings as a threat on our lives and generally the economies across the world?
It's actually a whole range of issues. So indeed, we were delighted to sign the MOU, and that is specifically about forestation. And I think both here as well as in Europe, and frankly speaking, in places all across the globe, we do have an issue with deforestation, where as people we're simply cutting too many trees. More than 1 million acres per year we're losing as a world community, and that is actually harming our planet to a very large extent. So we have to solve that, and this is an issue on which the President and the European Commission would love to work together. Next to that, we have discussed how to phase out fossil fuels, how to phase out coal in particular, how to triple our renewable energy, how to double our energy efficiency, and also how to free up more money, because the reality is that climate action will take more money.
Commissioner, you mentioned the importance of reaching net zero carbon emissions by the year 2050. What specific policies and initiatives does the European Union plan to implement to ensure that you achieve this ambitious goal, and how will you ensure it aligns with global efforts?
Well, you know, if you look at the world, and whether you look at Europe or at many African countries or at Brazil and Chile, where I was 2 weeks ago, you see that the effects of climate change are already there. Significant droughts that we didn't have a couple of years ago, floodings, heavy rain, wildfires, and sometimes paradoxically the combination of these events almost at the same time. So it is happening, and unfortunately it will get worse before it gets better. So we as a world community need to do much more in terms of mitigation, which means driving out our emissions, but also in terms of adaptation, and that means making sure we are more resilient, more robust in anticipating droughts, anticipating floodings, for example.
Could you tell us about the roadmap, for the EU-Zambia forest partnerships signed earlier on today? I know for a fact that you did also meet the Minister responsible for green economy, Honorable Collins Nzovu, and why it is important in our fight against climate change.
Well, that is a very good question, and frankly speaking, these two go really hand in hand. Actually, it is a whole menu of things that you have to do, if at least you're willing to listen to what our scientists tell us. They tell us the momentum is now. The window of opportunity, unfortunately, is closing. Otherwise, the planet will simply heat up too much. So it is driving out fossil. It is more renewables. It is becoming more efficient with energy. It is making sure we, at the same time, have our people make a decent living, even though we are transforming into a greener economy. We're doing that in Europe. We've set ambitious targets for 2030. We're working on a new target for 2040, and we will definitely have to make zero in 2050. But we do want to do that in true partnership with your country, with Africa at large, and with the world at large, because it actually, this is a global problem, and if we only solve it in one corner of the world, then still everyone will have the negative effects.
COP27 last year was held in Egypt. This year it's going to be held in Dubai, and obviously from the 30th of November to the 12th of December. I'd like to find out from you, Commissioner, what specific strategies and initiatives you will propose to bridge the gap between current pledges and the necessary emissions reductions to limit global temperature increase.
Well, we feel it is of tremendous importance, and we can only commend your president and his government in taking this step, but also being such a leader on this topic. And it's what to me it shows is that on both of the sides of the relationship, there is a deep desire to work together on greening our economies, on fostering our economies, on tackling the various aspects of climate change. In this case, specifically about forestation. Again, a problem here, a problem at our continent, but actually all over the world. We were simply cutting too many trees. We were harming our biodiversity. So that has to change. And therefore, I can only say I admire the aspiration of your country, the action it takes. And for us, this is a first step in what we see should be an even broader partnership going forward.
Commissioner, realistically speaking, climate change has mostly been induced, by developed and the industrial world, while the global south, suffers the impact and its negative consequences. What is your view on the role of the Loss and Damage Fund and how it can address the consequences of climate change, especially in vulnerable regions like Africa?
I'm always a bit hesitant to give comments on specific ways countries have organized. But what I do recognize, and which I think is very smart of the government, is to make sure that you get full focus on this topic. And the uncomfortable reality is climate change as a topic that will be affecting all of our lives will not go away anytime soon. So if then as a government leader you want to signal the importance and you want to make sure there is focus, then it actually makes sense to either organize that in one department or make sure that people seamlessly work together. Different things can work. It also depends on the specific setup. But what I think is very good policy, and I see that here, I saw that in Kenya where I was with President Ruto yesterday, I see that in a range of other countries across the globe, is that focus actually does work.
You spoke about the importance of young people in driving the agenda of climate change. How do you plan to engage and collaborate with the youth to ensure their voices are heard and their ideas are integrated into the climate policies?
That is, I think, the million or maybe the multiple $1 million question. The reality is that the world is in very difficult circumstances geopolitically. The horrible war the Russians are waging in Ukraine, tensions in the Indo-Pacific, tensions in the Middle East, a lot of great power rivalry going on, and still the necessity for the world to do more in terms of climate action. But countries have various interests, continents have various interests, so my objective is to build bridges, to make sure we build alliances, and there is actually a very natural bridge between the African Union and the European Union, given their ambition. And if you link to that also the small island development states, some of our friends in Asia and Latin America, you do actually have a very large group of countries who demand more mitigation, more adaptation, more money, and actually now rather than next year.
You mentioned the importance of the EU Global Gateway strategy to invest in the green, secular and digital transition. Can you tell us more about the EU-Zambia green partnerships and the concrete projects that EU will support?
The European Union has been pushing for this fund for a number of years, and I'm also glad that we made a significant step at the previous COP. At COP27 in Egypt. We do need to make sure this gets into existence, but to be brutally honest with you, I feel that yes, there is an obligation for us as Europeans to contribute, but actually everyone who does have the ability to pay cannot walk away from this cause. So my call to others across the globe is help, in burden sharing. Help also countries in Africa, help countries in Latin America, help small island development states, which do not have caused any harm themselves, but are the most at the receiving end of climate change. The world really has to rally together. And the second thing to keep in mind is that loss and damage is not a thing that we can do in isolation. Actually, the range of African countries, the European Union, the ambitious countries around the globe should push for loss and damage in combination with more action on mitigation.
Commissioner, the EU is a strong leader in renewable energy technologies. How will the EU collaborate with African countries, including Zambia, to transfer these technologies and support their green agenda?
We are roughly on the right track, but we need to run much faster. Since the Paris Agreement of a couple of years ago, the course of travel is the right one, but time is not on our side. So we have to pace, we have to speed up, we have to improve and do better. That is the harsh reality.
As we conclude, Commissioner, the fact of the matter is that the African continent does not take climate change as a global conversation. What they care most about is what they're going to eat and where they're going to sleep. How do you, propose that the messages around climate change are packaged very well to ensure that the people do appreciate that this is indeed a threat?
No, thank you for mentioning that, and that is indeed the case. And it is because I truly feel that those who have the most years ahead of them at this planet, who might well be most at the receiving end of climate change, also deserve a voice. And it is interesting to see that here in Africa, but also in the European Union and more broadly, it is the younger generation that is most concerned, that is most listening to our scientists, that is most wondering whether we are actually doing enough, and they know, as we know, that the answer unfortunately is no. So what I seek to do in many countries I'm visiting is talk to the young. At COP, I'm going to make a deliberate point to also involve them in the discussion, and I feel that in general, this is something we should do as leaders in governments when discussing climate action. But frankly speaking, it holds good for many other subjects as well. This is the voice of the next generation, and the best thing we can do is leave a slightly better country, a slightly better continent, a slightly better world for the young. Yeah, so this is our attempt. This is our attempt to build bridges far beyond our own continent, and we're indeed doing that with a number of countries, with your country in particular. And it ranges from indeed greening the economy to critical raw materials in which your country is actually very good. And it is a way to not only build business ties, build security ties, but also enhance political conversations and people-to-people connections. And that is, I think, the power of these type of instruments. It is articulating a vision, a strategy, if you will, and then trying to indeed day by day putting your money where your mouth is. And what I've learned when I was in business myself, but also as a former finance minister, is that any transaction in such a partnership is actually much more than that. It solidifies understanding, it solidifies people-to-people relationships, and that is precisely what the world will need in the 21st century. That is actually one of the main areas of focus, as you rightfully mentioned. And by the way, I can only commend Zambia for what it is doing in its energy mix. I was looking at the figures, and it's very impressive what you're already doing in terms of renewable energy. At the same time, for the whole world, there is a lot of ground to be conquered in further greening our energy mix. And to your question, I was actually just with business leaders here who are active here in the capital. I was discussing, how do we go about it? How do we make sure that we get better, cleaner, and also safer ways of cooking for people in your country all across the north, the south, the east, and the west? How do we make sure we dramatically step up the number of solar panels, which are getting cheaper and cheaper? The cost curve is going down rapidly, so there's huge opportunity. But at the same time, the reality is that only 4% of global investments in solar panels are going to Africa as we speak. So that should be much more, particularly because your continent gets 40% of the sun. So there is a mismatch to be bridged, and the EU would love to play a role in that. And we're trying to do that with public funding, but also with involving the business community and making them enthusiastic to do business here. And you're very right. If you don't have food, if you don't have anything to drink, if you are very worried about the future of your children, clearly that is the first concern. And then things at a higher abstraction level come second. And so that I fully understand and appreciate, and that actually should motivate us even more to tackle these causes as well. Having said that, the uncomfortable reality is that climate change is indiscriminate. It is coming to every corner of the world. Droughts are coming to every corner of the world. Same for flooding. Same for wildfires, for heavy rain, and we're seeing it. I was in an institution in Kenya where they had data on this. It is deeply depressing, highly insightful, but deeply depressing to see, what is currently happening, and no one is isolated from these causes. So we do need to step up our efforts. We need to help out and show solidarity, particularly to those most in need, because they will also be the most vulnerable again in the topic of climate change.
Thank you so much, Commissioner.
Thank you very much, sir. It was my pleasure.
Thank you.